Yeah, so welcome to the theme of November and this leadership lounge, and it's on creation care, which I'm very excited about, and have some two amazing guests in the studio here, the Zoom studio. As most of you would know about the ELLC, that we have a theme every month, and it's a community, European leaders community, or learning community. Right now, we are a community of 1,184 since yesterday on the Facebook group, and it's still growing. So with that too, please invite your friends or fellow leaders, to become part of this. And so it's a place of sharing goods, really. You should check out our archive there. With incredible resources in many different areas. Even if you want a mentor or you want even looking for a spiritual director, somebody that can help with debriefing, all kinds of things. So today, creation care. We gave the title, Creation, Our Future, and you can read into that in many different ways. So for the first time, we have an interest group actually facilitate the entire month. And this is a creation care hub from UK, from Scotland. And so they have actually pulled together, the different resources. And so happy to have you, Ben and Christy, with us. I would have you actually introduce the theme just in a minute. But let me try and introduce you two first a little bit, and then I'll actually ask you to introduce one another, because you know each other way better than I do. I've just had the joy of getting to know you just a little bit. So I know, Ben, I actually had to look up your title or your speciality, because I thought paleoclimatologist. What exactly is that? I thought that's of people dying, but paleo, that's something different. So, so the study of climate, or the climate during, an older time, sort of. I'll have you say more about it, but you have been serving 21 years in intercultural studies with YWAM as well, and before you studied also in the Himalayan mountains, or actually did research in the Himalayan mountains, and just really tracking how the climate is doing, I understand. And you have moved also. You worked in London for some time with your wife, and raised children there as well. And then we have Christy from Wisconsin, and you did your thesis in Norway, I understand, with the creative thesis. So I believe that would be Ålesund, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
You're married to Phil, my marine biologist. Actually, I met him at an event some time ago, and I said, "Marine biologist, what are you doing in YWAM?"
Yeah.
And he couldn't be with us today. He's up scuba diving. I'm just kidding.
He wishes.
Yeah, I bet. But you're really into fine arts and clear and honest, integral communication. So very happy to have you with us. I know you, as well as Phil and Ben, you are pioneers of this hub, of Creation Care Hub, like a hub of specialists, as well as this. I'm picking up this blend of deep intercession. You have the interest of the fine arts of the heart, as well as the condition of the climate, the environment, and what we can do. So I see you as a group of servants to YWAM in some ways, if that would be true. But before I try and say something wrong here, I'd like you to introduce one another, if you could do that. What would you want to say about Christy, Ben?
Christy is the great communicator. not just fine arts, but all sorts of reinterpretation of what a scientist like her husband or myself might say. And then she says, no, but what does that mean? And it takes her a while perhaps to understand it, like most people. And then, oh, so it should be said this way. And you suddenly realize that it could be said that way. And everyone
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So yeah, she's an absolute gem like that.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I really enjoy. It's funny because I wanted to be a Bible translator when I was younger, but didn't quite manage that. So this is a great opportunity to use that gift to translate sciencey information into language that people can understand.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Not that they can't do that themselves either. It's just I don't have the background, so sometimes you forget.
Sometimes you need to pull it out of them to even find words that more people understand, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I find that, yeah. So I have a background, in fine art. I studied at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and ceramics was my emphasis there, but I've done a lot of communication since coming into YWAM. So a lot of mostly visual, like design and things like that, but have picked up a lot of communication skills along the way and ways to communicate to a broad audience, especially rubbing shoulders with people in Harpenden who were doing more YWAM international communications, and that was good. And Ben, I feel like I always want to introduce Ben in a way that he just really loves hearing from God, and I really appreciate his heart for prayer, and he happens to have a PhD in climate science.
It's like as I just read a little bit about you, Ben, also like you have two ears to the ground, or I don't know, you're hearing, or maybe one ear to the ground, you're hearing, how the climate and the environment is doing, but also what God thinks about it, so a big ear to him. Yeah. And you seem to be quite a prophetic group as well,
Yeah, I think there's something going on in the spirit in this, let's say, decade. So many different Christian groups are saying, we've missed something. We haven't been looking after God's creation like he wanted. One way you can tell that, there's dozens of books coming out. Different people and many, many different groups. So, but we just felt God wanted us to do this. And for many, many years, God had me lay down the science completely. That's what we do, all right? God wants us to do something. Okay, we lay down the thing. He said, don't forget it, but lay it down. And I had no expectation of it coming back. And it was about 3 years ago, God said there's something different coming. And it took me ages to actually hear what it was. And it totally surprised me that the creation care and the climate was really mattering to God. One of the things he said, interesting, he said, you know all this, why aren't you praying about it? Well, I didn't know how to pray, that's why. But it turns out actually you pray about it as just like any other thing you pray about. You listen to God and you pray what he gives you. But it was a fundamental shift in my direction at that point, as God called me from back to, but into a totally new thing, really.
Wow, fascinating. Before we dive too deep into our topic here, I thought if you could just introduce the items, if you can say like that, what you've produced and are producing for this month.
Sure. So we have two articles. One of them is called Creation, What Does God Think? And that's a bit more theological based. So looking at some of the words that are used in more depth, and which Ben is writing. And then Phil has written creation care, what can we do? And so that's a bit more the practicalities and how doing things actually gives us the authority to speak into that in young people's lives and also into each other's. So those are the articles. And then there's the LDX talks. And Phil's got a talk on speaking hope in an age of anxiety. And that is speaking to this generation who there's a lot of people who have actual anxiety over how the world is going. And but he's talking about how we have such a privileged position as Christians, and we know a God who loves and cares for everything, and why that's really important in this time. And then I'm talking about, my title is There Is No Way, or Love Your Neighbor, which is basically just saying how important it is with what we do, that what we do affects people everywhere. Like we're not just our own insular solo being, but we are a body, and God's created us that way, and we have to think about what we're doing because it is having an impact on our neighbors all over the world.
Very good. Actually, just as you mentioned that, I was thinking years ago I was traveling in China, and I was in Chengdu, and we actually didn't see the sun. I was there for several months. I didn't see the sun at all at that time, and that was just all the smog, and so many people, they were struggling with respiratory diseases, as you can imagine. And I thought, that's a community curse. Curses and blessings, that's to do with it's not just a spiritual it's really, that was a community curse because of burning coal for heating and for cooking and for everything, so so in that, we are thinking a big scale here as well, and things affects what our neighbor does, and what I do to my neighbor, it affects the whole. Great. Thank you. Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing all your, both reading the articles and seeing the LDX talks and so on, as well as a roundtable discussion at the very end. So, so happy you're here. So thank you for being with me. I did think if you could just share just a little bit more about your YWAM story, both of you, just like some of the bullet points, in your YWAM story.
Go on, Christy.
So my YWAM story. So I actually got into YWAM. I grew up in a Lutheran church and had no idea about YWAM until I got to university. Where the church that I was going to had a creation care. No, that's not right. Got that on my brain. I had a course, a discipleship training course that they ran. So some YWAMers who ran it in the church, and we ended up going on outreach into Mexico. And I was like, oh, great! I can actually use my gift of music, and I can use my gift of sport, and I can talk to people about Jesus. Like, this is amazing. I want to do this. And so I finished my degree at uni, and then went back to Mexico and found out that there was a group of people who'd come from Norway who ran a creative DTS, and I just finished a fine art degree. And so I was trying to work out, how do I do this? Like, I know I'm a Christian, and I know I'm an artist, and how do these go together? Because I hadn't seen that growing up, really. And so it was just amazing that was possible. And so I looked for somewhere that maybe ran another creative DTS. Didn't find one, so I ended up in Norway. And it was beautiful and amazing, and had such a fantastic time. And God called me. Well, I felt called into missions, the first calling, when I was actually in second grade, and heard from some missionaries in our church and thought, oh, I don't know enough about God to do that. But yeah, so then there I was years later.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Yeah. So that was how you got into the mission. And Ben, again, just a few sentences.
Quite different. So I mean, I was doing a PhD, traveling in and out of South Asia, Pakistan, India, Nepal, and I was introduced to this YWAM group who were doing amazing cross-cultural work in that part of the world. And they used to brief me on how to help because they knew the culture really well.
Yeah.
And by the end of that, I thought, wow, these guys are doing such amazing stuff. Forget the science. I'm going to get on and do missions with these guys. So yeah, amazing. I particularly appreciated that people heard God and did what he said. But people worked on relationships until they worked. You could have an argument one morning and the next day you sort it out. That sort of thing. I like that fundamental knowledge of what God is like being the basis for why we do things. Not saying other groups don't have that, but I just like that in YWAM so much.
Very beautiful. Thank you. So now you're both in Paisley, and you have started this creation hub. Can you just tell us just a little bit more about what you do and what is there for, if you can say it like that,
So
go ahead, Christy.
One of the reasons why we started the Creation Care Hub is because we recognized where there was so much going on in YWAM, but there were all these. Phil's a marine biologist, and God had spoken to him. He'd worked in the Seychelles Islands for 3 years and then came into YWAM. He was doing marine and terrestrial conservation. And God said, this isn't going to be wasted. And he had a choice to do more education or to join YWAM. And so he decided to join YWAM. And we knew that was there waiting for him. And then we ended up diving deeper into that and discovering all sorts of things, of like realizing, oh wow, how we grow things, actually a lot of the times it kills the soil rather than building it up in life, but we could do it a different way, and it's not having as much nutrition. And okay, wow, this is really interesting, people are interested in this. And so it just kind of grew from there, that actually we need to bring more education into this area, and that God cares so much about what he's made, and really we kind of ignore it a lot of the time. So just bringing that to the surface.
Excellent.
And as a resource for while I'm anywhere, everywhere. So a combination of the practical of how you work things through and the understanding both of how God made things, but also biblically what our responsibility is. And I think by and large that's been just not fully understood, at least. So by providing quite good teaching grounded in quite good practical action in a YWAM context, we hope to help as many YWAM centers as possible to care with God for his creation.
That's great. So I understand you have both also in some of the resources coming up, that there's some very practical things, because also many places, leaders are busy and it's like, we want to care for creation, but, just tell me how to, instead of you have to go and do all the study yourself, and what is the best way to do recycling and set up things. And so fantastic if there's a center that can even say, actually, here are some steps, you don't have to figure everything out yourself. This space of, implemented a certain thing, or, just,
including in the heart, the teaching in the heart. It's not, if you have lots of teaching, that's not going to get you there. No. But you do have to have enough teaching to start learning more in God, and we find it throughout the Bible in ways we hadn't realized, and it's part of the God story in ways we hadn't realized, to live your life, run your affairs as a community in ways that look after and enhance the rest of what God made.
Yeah.
And as that heart develops, then the recycling is less onerous and more of a joy.
Yeah.
And you want it to be a community effort of joy, of, oh, good, we no longer throw this, we reduce how much plastic we're throwing away because we thought it through, somebody specialized perhaps and worked out a bit more as to what they could buy, but that's less plastic. Or together we're using less energy, which, wow, in Europe in 2022 is exactly what we're all thinking about. In Paisley base, the gas bill has gone up by 3.5 times, a multiple of 3.5 times. That's with government assistance. So that's a real shock to our system. And probably I've heard it's the same in different parts of Europe.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. So Ben, would you mind just unpack that a little bit? Because we went from waste management to the heart, and in some ways,
they come together.
Yeah. So in some ways, you went straight to the why, and I think that's so often where we need to start, because you start with heart and heart, why, and then things.
Okay, but actually, I'm going to go backwards again. Sorry.
Yeah.
But right now, if we're facing enormous energy bills,
yeah,
that's partly because we've continued to trust in the unsustainable, which is digging carbon out of the ground and burning it, which was fine for the Industrial Revolution, but now we know is damaging badly and is now very expensive. So it's kind of really pushing us to face reality. And that can be an onus to go back to God and say, oh God, have we missed something? And I think what many of us have missed is that he designed us to look after the rest of it in a deeper way than we'd realized, which is part of what the article is about. How deep did God want us to look after it? Or was it an extra? Was it something a few people care about while we just get on with life as normal and easily until Jesus comes again and then he burns up the earth, which isn't quite what happens. There's a refining, but not a destruction. And so do you see what I mean? So the practical can push us to the heart and the finding out what God thinks. But then I'll give you an example now of on Monday in YWAM Paisley, I and Christy jointly did a seminar or a community input. The whole community was there of how can we reduce energy usage considering what we're facing as a community. And we integrated into that God's heart was to have less impact on our neighbors and to not burn stuff fundamentally, I suppose. Live more sustainably. And some things are quite easy, like I'll give you an example. Do you remember 20, 30 years ago, everyone was saying, let's change to these wonderful lights. And they use 15% of the old style heat bulbs. That was great. But do you know what? Replacing with LEDs now, we did a calculation for our lecture room in Paisley and said, how quickly could we repay the investment in LEDs if we just got rid of these? And I thought maybe it'd be 3 years or something. 35 days.
No way.
35 days. So it's absolutely worth going around your location and saying, have we got any of these still? Probably. Let's recycle those. You can get some of the materials out of them. And let's get LEDs going.
I'm writing this down.
Right. So these are quite easy steps. They do take time. They do take a bit of initiative and some investment. But actually, that's a no-brainer. We've also been measuring the fridge that's in the community room, and it uses 7.5 kilowatt hours per day. Well, my fridge at home, which is not very efficient, but it only uses 1. Phil and Christy just bought one that is 0.5 kilowatt hour per day. All right. So that's a multiple of 10. So to replace that fridge is a financially sensible thing to do, but will also help God's caring for the environment. So we are in a position where some things we would not have considered before really are sensible. We talked about plastic, we talked about waste, and that involves, I think, usually that involves 1 or 2 people really thinking it through a bit. And where do we get our food from? How much plastic does it come in? Is it possible to do less of it? And some people will absolutely love that. And then if we all submit to each other's wisdom and knowledge, we can, as a community, improve our footprint, what we're damaging people with. And so you end up sort of leading into each other's wisdom. Sometimes also your supporters have wisdom on things that you know nothing about.
Yeah.
And so it becomes like a community effort. Oh, right. So you know about electric cars. I've heard that they're 10 times worse than petrol cars. Is it true? Well, you can dig into that and find out, oh, actually, no, they're just a little bit worse when you build them. And then after that, they're better on every mile you drive. Still, they're expensive to buy. Is there a way to get a grant? Is the government where you are encouraging low carbon heating or something like that? Well, in that case, jump in on it if you possibly can, because the long-term improvements are there. Often as YWAM, we're so used to doing things cheaply and easily. We don't have always enough people, it feels. We don't have always enough money.
Yeah.
And yet we do actually do some things which are quite intensive of money and people. And so we could include this in our thinking. So if you're building an extension or you have to repair the roof, then the extra 20% to put some solar panels on the roof, that might be something that donors delight in. We shouldn't run away from things because it is part of God's heart, and therefore we can expect God's provision for it. If we see it as God's heart, the faith rises up. Oh yeah, we could do that. We don't have to say, oh, that's beyond us because we're just a little charity. No, we're not. God's a massive God. He can make things work in this area as in other areas. There's a few examples. Do you want more?
Yeah. No, I think it's brilliant because it's so true, isn't it? Also with supporters, if there's something that really moves their heart and is in their line of interest and concern, they're willing to donate into that.
Yes.
Because they're also thinking of their neighbor impact in some ways, in the overall.
Yeah. And many supporters are more interested in the long term than well, I was a couple of 6 months.
I know.
So God bless them. That's the different roles we have, I think.
Yeah. So some of the examples you just mentioned, you could say that's on it's things that we all can do. I mean, I can invest in light bulbs, in LED light bulbs, and I have, and small things like that. Even in the usage of, you could say, the oven, it's like, okay, so I'll have this for dinner. So I also want to bake some buns. Let me just pair that up that, you use the heat around the same time and all those things. But do you have a few more examples for the base leaders that are watching this as well?
Christy?
Yeah,
I mean, there are plenty of things that we can do. So Phil and I have focused a lot on reducing plastic within our own home, and then encouraging our community to reduce plastic where they are as well, because if we don't buy the plastic, then hopefully that will show the companies that we don't want the plastic, because that plastic doesn't disappear after it goes in the bin. It stays around for hundreds of years, and can end up all over the place. So I think looking for ways that you can reduce plastic on your food, reduce plastic in what you buy. So like maybe your sponges, you can swap out your sponges for a more natural product that will actually break down and go back into, you can compost it, which means it will break down and you then don't throw that in the bin. You can look at your, we were talking about, this is more of an energy usage, but we were talking about how when we rinse cups and dishes, naturally before we were using hot water because that's what you do. But now at this point, when that hot water is actually costing quite a lot because your gas is going on every time you turn the hot water tap on, you can rinse your dishes with cold water. Unless you obviously, like, that doesn't work so much if you have greasy plates, but that a lot of times you don't always have greasy plates. You're rinsing a cup out, or you're rinsing some crumbs off a plate. Yeah, so that would be good. And I think also looking into composting. So hopefully people are composting already, because if we just chuck food in the bin, that actually releases methane up into the air, which then contributes to global warming. Yeah. So then if we can compost that food, that actually reduces that by quite a lot. I'm not always so good at facts and figures, but I know it's a significant amount that it reduces when you compost compared to putting it in the bin. So see if your local area composts, and if you're not doing that already, get a bin, do that. And if you really want to get into it, which I would encourage people to, is actually having compost in your location where you are, because then that actually will come back to you. You can grow things either in pots if you're in a little location, or maybe you want to grow some food for your location, and that will save you money, and also you get better food because it can be more nutritious if you're using organic.
Thank you so much. So I'm thinking too, as you're talking, you did mention composting, and I would imagine there's some here that are not composting. So instead of having to go and figure it all out, do you have a 1, 2, 3 of composting that I can a PDF sheet, file?
1, 2, 3 composting. Yes, I think we can make sure that we get a file for that. Yeah. Phil is the king of compost. My husband, he knows.
Together with Tom Bloom, I suppose.
Yeah. We changed in our previous location. We changed the composting system from cold compost to hot compost, which meant that we could put meat, we could put basically any food products. We could put our cardboard in there. It's a mix between carbon and nitrogen, so green and brown, to make it easy. And I don't remember the exact numbers of it, but which is why it would be good to just have it written down for you and have Phil do that.
And I think even a 1, 2, 3 of energy saving, because that would be get a lot of hits right now. I can tell you that. Of as everybody's trying to save on the electricity and heating as winter is coming now. So it's at least here in northern Europe.
Yeah, in Northern Europe, it's not just about heating less; it's about heating more wisely.
Yeah.
And it's also about moisture control. So we were talking about this on Monday, which I used to know these in hot countries where you just swipe down, the floor, right?
Yeah.
Now I found out you need them in cold countries to swipe the shower area of stuff, so it doesn't just evaporate and become damp in your building. Then you're going to get health problems if you have a very humid building.
Yeah.
So you need to deal with both, perhaps not heating as much, but also heating wisely and also getting the moisture out quite effectively. Otherwise, you have other bad consequences, which we're not used to, because we've been used to heating quite a lot.
Okay, I've not thought about that one. For sure, also insulation would be one thing.
But we've had so much fun in Paisley. Well, it's not fun. We have in Paisley been insulating under the floor. If you go to the Paisley Facebook page, you can see some pictures of us just trying to get that old building to lose less heat. And already those rooms are much, much more comfortable. There's lots of other things an old building like that needs, but that was something we could reach. We could do it. It's not very expensive, and we did it as a community with like 10 people helping in different ways. So everyone's learned a skill. We had joy. Someone wrote a rap about the installation. It was just amazing. So this thing can be a joy. It doesn't have to be a burden, and the consequence is better in lots of ways.
The creation rap. No, I think the making creation happy rap. Maybe you should have that recorded. We will put it on our Facebook as well. That would be great. I'm completely just into this talk and losing my script here. So yes, a checklist even of what are some things to look for, for energy saving. I think that would be quite hot at the moment. But But I was thinking too, you know, we had Ruth Perrin a while back from Durham, living in Durham, on FutureWise with a talk. And here she was talking about how to reach and communicate with Gen Z, or Z. And she mentioned that there's three things we have to talk about to be relevant to the younger generation. And one of these three, that was the environment and the climate. What do you think? Is the environment something especially relevant to the younger generation, or is it to everyone? Or do you think she's right that we have to talk about it in order to even, you know, be relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we need to talk about it, because there's these guys growing up and they've basically been told that their future isn't there unless we change what we're doing. And if we as Christians just think it's all going to burn, and we don't think that God cares about what he's made, then how are we going to be able to speak to them? How are we going to be able to connect with them? We can't. They think the thing that they care the most about, or potentially the most about, we seem to just be ignoring, or think that it's not, we don't need to bother about that, when actually God cares so much about what he's made. It's like, God's the artist, right? Like the great artist, the great creator. And if me as an artist, so Phil always uses this example of, I wouldn't go and smash my wife's art pieces just because that would really hurt her. And so that's kind of how we need to change our thinking with the rest of creation. This is it. And I talk about it all burning, because in Revelation it does talk about a new heaven and a new earth. But if you look at those words in Greek, that new isn't neo, it's actually kainos, and which means renewed rather than new. Yeah. And so actually in the end, God's going to renew the heavens and earth. And so what are we doing now to work towards that? He's asked us to look after what he's made in Genesis, and that still stands, like even with Jesus coming back and the hope of heaven. But surely that's when we pray the Lord's Prayer, and on earth as it is in heaven, we should be doing that on earth as it is in heaven. And so we need to be speaking into these things, and we have such a unique position as Christians as well in all of this, because you get the humanistic view of like, oh well, we're just part of the other animals on the earth, when actually no, we've been given a unique position to care for the rest of what God's made, because we've been made, we're part of that creation as well. I think that's the other thing. Our words, with environment, we oftentimes then forget that as humans, we're part of that creation as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what you're touching on here as well, it's worldview, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I know Ben, I know that you're teaching also quite a bit, you know, on that topic. So how do you bring that in your teaching?
Yeah, it is really the God story from Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah.
That he made us. So what's God's first thought about humans? Make God in our own image, so that they may look after everything else he's been making. So that's really fundamentally our reason to be.
Yeah.
In a way, nobody taught me that in nearly 30 years of being a Christian. Nobody taught me that. Yeah. But of course we knew that he made us with rulership and so on, but the details of a rulership, anyway, that's in my article. Go and read the article.
Yeah.
But for young people, where we've been doing bits with young people in DTS and so on, which has mainly been Phil and Christy actually, rather than me, they've responded so wonderfully. And when we had the outreach in Glasgow last year around COP26, we were carefully not trying to be political or anything, but it was a major event. The whole world came. Just around 80 YWAMers came from different countries on the streets of Glasgow, and we prayed like nobody's business, and met 104 different nations, 120 different nations, I think it was. So, you know, there are ways that the young people respond immediately, but it isn't for young people. It's for everybody. It's for, and if you're a human being, you have the responsibility and ability to rule over the earth. The question is how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
You're going to squash it, or are you going to rule like Jesus rules?
Yeah.
With glorious serving. That is the path. Well, but again, that's in the article. But so yeah, we totally agree. This is, you have to talk about this in the right way. But what a shame if all they heard from us is, oh no, don't worry, just trust God. Trust God means doing something usually. Almost always trust involves an action. And the funny thing is, God can speak to us and inspire us. That's what we believe, right? And that he can show us ways to look after his creation, which nobody's necessarily thought of. When you build faith, then you build community. Guess what? You can then actually solve some of these major problems. Well, that's our job, actually. Just like if we had a social problem on our town, we'd be praying for a solution. Well, we have considerable ecological problems. They're really significant. They're affecting billions of people now around the world. Countries I used to visit all the time are desperately close to being too hot. And one had a flood this year, which submerged a third of the areas of the country. This is really not normal. And we're part of that. Well, God has ways through that, just like he has ways through in other areas. So we have to introduce this into our faith, our expectation of God. And that fundamentally starts with heart and knowing what God is like. But we can pull our young people through this process, and they can, I believe that YWAM will end up producing, inspiring some amazing breakthroughs, just like we have in other areas, let's say child welfare or all sorts of things that YWAM has done amazing things in. We keep discovering things that were born in YWAM that have changed the world. Well, why wouldn't God be inspiring it in this precious area as well? I'm sure he will. That's kind of
a message of hope. That's a message of hope, isn't it? You know, it's not just doom, but it's a message of hope that God is still involved.
Right.
Exactly. We're so enthusiastic.
Okay, go Ben and then Christy.
I've lost my thought. Carry on, Christy.
Well, I was just going to say that is the beauty of YWAM as well, that we do believe that we can hear God's voice and that he does care about these things, and he can speak into these things. We value intercession. We value going to God and listening to him. And I think that's where, like, that was kind of how we got into creation care. Was I'd watched this documentary on plastic and thought, oh my goodness, what are we doing? I thought I was aware of environmental issues and was doing really well. And then I realized, oh my gosh, how many people are there out there like me? What are we going to do about this? And so we prayed and were led down paths to reduce our plastic. And but then God also showed us, we had a time of intercession, me and Phil, and then another girl who had some background in sustainability, and God showed us, the three of us together, how to speak to people about these topics and to use a butterfly out in public, and we can bring information to them about how many paper cups we're using and how much carbon does a tree sink. And so just getting that information out there and helping them realize actually God really cares about this stuff. And so yes, we ended up doing evangelism because we were talking about what God cares about. And so it's not disconnected. It can be very connected. And I think it's such a that there is hope.
Yeah.
To be able to share that with young people, and to share that the God that they've been learning about at church actually cares about this thing that they really care about as well, and that we can work together, we can co-create, and that we can, hopefully there will be some solutions to things. And I think there are, and he can give us wisdom that he knows about all this stuff, right? Like, he knows how to deal with plastic, he knows how to deal with too much pesticides, he knows how to deal with these things, and we can seek him on that and do that together.
Yeah, no, very good. So with that, isn't it also, I'm just thinking here of Dr. Howard Malmsted, right? So he had a passion for clean water to the world. And so he used all his, both his creative capacity and his hearing from God capacity, as well as his scientific background and all his studies and understandings there. So I believe that I would probably not have come up with his water purifying system, because I just don't have that knowledge, and it was all the years invested in studying, but God could give it to him because he had that, and right. In that sense, so I think also it's in some ways it's giving even greater value also to the scientists, and all the different other vocations in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's been the fascinating thing too. By talking more about this, all of a sudden we've discovered there's quite a few people in YWAM who have science background, but they haven't really done anything necessarily with it in YWAM. Some of them have, but there's a lot of people out there with knowledge, and that's part of this Creation Care Hub, is trying to pull that to the surface and connect along with the Creation Care Circle that we're a part of too, that meets once a month online.
Great. So make sure to advertise that also on the Facebook page. So invite people into that. Now, from some of the things you just said, Christy, I'm thinking you said you ended up evangelizing, and it was also linking to this creation care. Do you think that, I can ask you, Ben, do you think that we have, like within YWAM, we have evangelism, we have mercy ministries, we have training in some ways? That's sort of how we often describe this is what we're about, like a purpose, or like these are the three branches. In some ways, if we look at evangelism and missions, it's not exactly the same thing. I mean, one thing is evangelism, getting, that's a hard issue. It's getting right with God. It's like revival, you could say, and then missions is not more to do with a much bigger, broader scope, with reformation in some ways,
discipling nations
business, and the kingdom, the much bigger aspect. How do you think we can couple those two in a stronger way, or even?
I have to say, I've had quite a bit of repentance to do. So if we're looking at discipleship, evangelism, whatever, you always find, oh, God thought this. I didn't realize I was thinking this. I've got to come to his side. Core biblical YWAM teaching. And I've talked to various other creation care interested YWAMers who've talked about how they've had to repent from certain attitudes. So I'm not telling you what to repent of. Ask God. If there's something where you've had a certain attitude and he actually thinks differently, that's really important to get right, just like any other area of life. And so once we understand how God thinks on an issue, then you can disciple the nations in that area. And it just so turns out, like Christy was saying, that God really cares about many of the things that anxious, let's say eco-anxiety people are caring about. And so it is part of evangelism. And it would be unhelpful in evangelism to say God doesn't care. Really, that would put people off. You've already had certain evangelicals say things which sound like that anyway, just because they don't understand them, in my opinion. And so you've got so it is actually integrated to evangelism. It actually is integrated to mission once we understand God's heart on this. Mercy ministries, wow, there's a lot of mercy ministries to do anyway. But I was talking to the what was her position? She was a position high up in a major Christian relief organization, not YWAM. She said in the last 10 years, they've moved from being mainly long-term relief to mainly emergency relief. They used to pride themselves in doing mainly long-term relief, but there's been so many more disasters in the last few years, which is mainly a climate issue, that they've had to be pulling people out of floods and rebuilding things. So the world has shifted at the time we're in, and therefore the amount of mercy ministries and the wisdom needed in mercy ministries now has to integrate creation care in a way it didn't. Speaking to people right across West Africa last month, asking about how the climate had changed, and they all said things are totally different. The rain comes when we don't know, we didn't expect it. It now comes too heavily, it washes away our soil and our seed. Things have changed so much. And I know YWAM is involved in regenerative agriculture and things like that, are finding this as well from what the locals tell them. So to have this in our worldview, in our understanding of where we are, and our prophetic view of what the times are, it's integrated. And one of the reasons we have set up the hub, God's asked us, I think, to set this up, is to help people understand that and put it in the right box so that then we act appropriately. And it's also because people notice what we do. So in the Christian world, people notice what YWAM does. I'm on a group with a whole load of mission leaders in different mission agencies looking at creation care and how it affects mission, and how we can work out ways to reach people, which also helps their sustainability in their environment. Right? But every agency is thinking that through. And they all say, well, what's YWAM doing? Because we're known to pioneer and do new things. And we do. So that's exciting. But the whole world notices what Christians do, because we are God's people, we are prophetic. And so as we do things which are in line with the right direction, that matters. And incidentally, like Christy referred to, it's not the same as the humanist agenda. We learn a lot from environmentalists. That's fine. We can learn. But there are motivations which are different, and there are outcomes which are different. This was really keenly observed by a very left-wing humanist writer about a year ago. She said, the thing about missionary faiths, meaning mainly Christianity, is that they believe that human hearts can fundamentally change, whereas we in the environment movement are not so sure about that, which is really just such a correct observation. But we have hope because, okay, humans have caused big problems, but we have the potential to do things really differently in a huge mass as well, not just tiny areas. And so as we step in the right direction, I'm sure that the propheticness of those actions also will have a bigger impact than we would normally expect.
Yeah, I think also, just to chuck in one more thing on that, God, when we do what he's asked us to do, when we turn from the ways that are not building life, that are destroying, he meets us in that. He wants to meet us in that. And if we as humans recognize, oh wow, we've really not been doing this well, and we say, oh God, we're so sorry. And there's a verse, I'm not probably going to quote this exactly, but that says, and they will turn, if they would repent and turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal their land. And so there is this connection between what we do and God coming and doing the miraculous as well. And that's not just for us to rely on the miraculous to happen. No. We still need to do our effort and do our best. But we do have that hope that it isn't just us who are going to fix this. But it's us and God.
Oh,
he can do the miraculous.
there's not that. Yeah, but with it also, there's not that blind leap of faith. In a sense, it's not just revelation, but it's revelation and reasoning, and then actually doing something about it. You know, but we have that. We have that access to the. Yeah, so good, so good.
Yeah,
very good thought.
Yeah.
I understand our time is kind of getting short here, but I'd love to hear. I have warned you because there's always this question, our mistake question, as we say, you know, and it's like it's a way to pull down the PhD down to a human level. No, but it's like, could you share just a mistake that we can learn from? Maybe also it could be relating to our topic here in your roles. And yes.
I had underestimated how entrenched many people's worldviews are. And I just, it was arrogance really in me. I thought if I introduced myself as a climate scientist and God said I need to get back into this, everyone will say, oh, good, right, we have lots of questions because we've heard this, that, and the other about climate. Maybe you can help us. Yes. Instead of that, which I hope would be kind of leaning into the expertise, well, some people did that, God bless them. But others were like, oh, you're the problem. So, as if I had horns and I was what about you. So it's like, this is a significant journey for people. Some people it's a very significant journey. And I just didn't respect that enough early on, let's say 2.5 years ago, and went saying, oh look, we can do this, we can solve this, we can do this. What? So wow. The processing of people, the communication, each person's at a different stage. I blew that several times.
So in some ways you have a double whammy because of your background, but also that you're a missionary. So sometimes when you talk to somebody, I'm missionary. So I have to sit next to you. Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Christy?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's so many that I could talk about, but just one will do. Yeah. I think maybe one of the biggest mistakes that I've made is just underestimating. Oh gosh, there's so many things I could say here. I think, okay, let's think. Anyway, lots of things. One of them would be I am an observer. I'm a keen observer. And a lot of times I don't always interpret what I'm observing properly, and to actually have those conversations quickly rather than waiting and stewing on something that maybe was not founded. So I guess believing the best in others. And and then also I think too with something that I've learned with art, and I think also with creation care, is the art and the creation care in itself is valuable, and you don't have to wrap it up in evangelism, but that those things are valuable, and you can meet with people, and people don't just try and power through those things to get your message heard, but actually be a listener and allow God to speak in that place, not just trying to and serving the other rather than I need to get my message out here.
Oh, very good. I think we all can learn from that. And it's so easy to jump to conclusions without, checking in. So thank you both of you for being vulnerable like that. Again, there's another question we always ask, and that's about books. What are you reading at the moment? Maybe in this realm that you would like to recommend, or you don't have to read it right now, but you may have a favorite book, a go-to that you would like to highlight, then please let us know.
Yeah, well, there will be a list of books.
Sure.
There's a couple that Christy's going to hold up now.
Yeah.
And I will talk through. So Moo and Moo, what a wonderful father-son name. Hey, Mr. Douglas and Jonathan Moo are theologians, but they write really, really clearly on creation care and with different words. So that's like a textbook, that one, creation care. We recommend that as being one of the best. I've heard other people recommend it. So that's good out of all the many books that are coming out.
Yeah.
And then on a different level, like a devotional level, there's this one we have found by Debbie Hawker and family,
right?
which is called Changing the Climate.
Yeah.
But they look at every single Bible passage they can think of, what God's shown them, to think about how climate and other things really are things that we can change bits of. And I'm going to I have stolen one of their best examples for my article. And then also on climate, this one, Catherine Hayhoe is she's a Canadian, Texas-based evangelical missionary kid climate scientist, and is also a very, very good communicator. And this just talks through not just climate science, but much more about how we work together to solve things. And it's a very, very constructive book. So I recommend that for people who are struggling with climate thoughts. There are others also on. I'm reading a book, don't have it with me just now, but called Hope in the Age of Climate Change, which again is a theologian, Chris Doran.
Okay.
And the first big chunk of it is looking at the theology of what God expects, and then goes into bits of climate stuff and hope. So we love that book. Got another one there, Christy?
I've got a couple. One, so this is slightly off, but if you're interested in the connection between land and God and blessing, then the grace outpouring is actually really interesting. That was maybe where we started delving into this, Phil and I. It's the story of Falderbrennen in Wales, and they were blessing everything around them, and then they found out, oh well, the farmers have higher crops and they've got more animals, and like there were just connections happening between what they were praying and the physical. So that's a good one. And then there's also this one. It's called God's Green Book, and so it's 7 Bible studies about the environment. And so if you're just starting off in this might be a good one for you to start off with, because it's got very practical things that you can do. I know, and for myself, I like practical things that connect with
absolutely
spirit. And so so it's got a few different chapters, practical things that you can do with your community, and it's recommended by Dave Bookless, who's the co-founder of Arosha, which they focus solely on creation care. So
wonderful. Thank you so much. Please make sure to make the list available as well, also on Facebook.
There's also this one, if you're into pollinators and want to know more about them, Planting for Honeybees. That's a good one. It's not necessarily Christian, but it will give you some really good ideas on how to help our pollinators.
Fantastic. And with that also comes that you shouldn't cut all your grass. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so we did do that. We took a section of our grounds and let it grow along, and we had probably over 12 different types of wildflowers out there, and it was buzzing all over the place. And we do actually need to help the pollinators because we are keeping our grass so short, and the pesticides that we're using aren't great for them in some places. I recognize I don't know everything about Europe, so I don't know what necessarily other countries are doing, but I know that in the UK we've lost a lot of grazing land for them, and a honeybee needs the same type of flower, and it will go out 10 times a day, and it needs 1,000 to 2,000 flowers each time it goes out, and that's just one bee. So yeah, we can help them.
That's one busy bee. That's a lot of flowers to visit.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you. But thank you, both of you. It has been enriching, fascinating to talk to you, and I look forward to hear much more from both your hub as well as the Creation Care Circle. And I know I kind of want section 2, leadership lounge 2, on this topic. But don't forget your homework now. So you need to make some 1, 2, 3s and checklists, both for saving electricity and composting and all the checklists you can think of, or 1, 2, 3 help.
Sounds good.
And and this book list, but other resources, even websites you would like to point us to. Please use the Facebook page as much as you like, and in particular now in November, just bomb us with Creation Care resources.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tove.
Thank you, Tove.
Great. Thank you. Please send greetings also to Phil, that is part of the hub, and blessings on your work. We want to be better creation carers, you can say it like that. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.